The marble floor of Innovate Global's lobby reflected Emma Sullivan's borrowed shoes like dark water swallowing dignity. She clutched the leather folder against her chest. Coffee stains on documents worth more than the building itself. If they were real. If grandfather hadn't lied while dying. Security issue, Mr. Montgomery. The guard's hand moved toward his radio, toward the kind of backup that removed confused teenagers claiming impossible things. Richard Montgomery materialized from shadow. $8,000 suit moving like liquid power. His laugh bounced off 40-foot ceilings. Cruel as winter. Thomas Sullivan's granddaughter in Walmart shoes. He plucked the folder from her trembling hands before she could resist. The watermark's crooked, sweetheart. What did this cost at Kinko's? Then Dorothy Hayes emerged from the executive elevator. Chanel suit cutting through the crowd like truth through lies. 5 words fell from her lips, each one detonating, "She owns this company." The folder slipped from Richard's fingers. Papers scattered. 40% super voting shares. The coffee stains suddenly looked like old blood. Before we continue, please leave a like and let me know which city you're watching from. Now, let's get back to the story. Emma Sullivan lived in Riverside Trailer Park, lot number 47, where the walls were thin enough to hear Mrs. Chen's oxygen machine wheezing through the night. At 19, she juggled 3 jobs: morning shift at Denny's, afternoon tutoring at the community center, and weekend nights stocking shelves at Walmart. The math came easy to her. Always had. Ever since she was little and Grandpa Bill would let her count the change from his coffee runs, numbers lined up in her head like soldiers, perfect and predictable, unlike everything else in her life. The trailer still smelled like him sometimes. Old Spice and pipe tobacco, though he'd quit smoking years before the cancer took him. She kept his fountain pen in her pocket, a Mont Blanc he'd bought with his first real paycheck from Innovate Global, back when it was just 5 guys in a garage dreaming of changing the world. The pen was worth more than her car, but she'd never sell it. Some things mattered more than money. Richard Montgomery's face stared out from the Forbes magazine she'd found at the laundromat. "Tech Titans Triumph," the headline read. The article mentioned her grandfather exactly once, in passing, like he was a footnote in his own company's history. Richard's smile in the photo was practiced, corporate, nothing like the hungry young man in the single photograph her grandfather had kept. Richard at 22, accepting his college diploma, Bill's hand on his shoulder like a proud father. Dorothy Hayes had been watching the trailer park for 3 hours from her Mercedes, parked behind the abandoned Texaco station. She knew Emma's schedule by heart: home by 10:47 p.m. after her Walmart shift, 15 minutes to check on Mrs. Chen, then studying until 2 a.m. for her online accounting courses. Dorothy had paid for those courses through a shell charity, just like she'd paid the hospital bills when Emma broke her arm at 14, just like she'd made sure the scholarship randomly selected Emma for the laptop she needed for school. The merger documents on Dorothy's passenger seat told a simple story. Zhao Industries would acquire Innovate Global for $4.2 billion. 500 jobs would be redundant. Richard would walk away with $180 million. The board would feast, and Emma, if she signed, would receive $400 million for her grandfather's shares. Enough to escape the trailer park forever. Enough to never worry about Mrs. Chen's medications or whether the car would start in January. Dorothy's hands trembled as she thought about the meeting tomorrow. After 15 years of shadows, Emma would finally learn who had been protecting her grandfather's greatest treasure. The number 47 bus wheezed to a stop at 5th and Commerce at 8:43 a.m. Emma counted out exact change, $2.50, her fingers still smelling like syrup from the morning shift she'd worked until 6 a.m. The driver, Harold, who'd been driving this route for 12 years, noticed her nice blouse. Job interview, honey. Something like that. She clutched the leather folder against her chest. Inside were documents she'd retrieved from the safety deposit box yesterday. The key hidden in her grandfather's fountain pen all along. 5 years of dust. 5 years of waiting until she turned 19. The will was specific about that. The Innovate Global building pierced the Denver skyline like a glass needle. 40 floors of ambition. Emma had been here once before, at age 7, holding her grandfather's calloused hand as he showed her the empire he'd built from nothing. Someday, pequeña, he'd said, using the Spanish endearment he'd learned from Rosa, his Mexican-American secretary who'd become his second mother. Someday, you'll understand why I built this. The security checkpoint smelled like fresh marble polish and intimidation. 3 guards, metal detectors, cameras everywhere. Emma's borrowed shoes, Dorothy's anonymous gift left at Goodwill where Emma shopped, clicked too loudly. Visitor pass. The guard's voice carried practiced boredom. I'm here for the shareholders meeting. His fingers paused over the keyboard. Behind Emma, the lobby filled with suits. 9 a.m. meetings meant 8:50 arrivals for the ambitious. She recognized some faces from the business journals she studied at the library. That was Jennifer Knox from Morgan Stanley. Behind her, the Zhao Industries delegation, 7 strong, their interpreter already earning his fee. You're not on the list, miss. I should be. Emma Sullivan. Nothing. Of course nothing. Richard wouldn't want surprises. The guard's hand moved toward his radio, probably to call the kind of security that escorted out confused old ladies who wandered in thinking this was still the Woolworths that stood here in 1987. Is there a problem? Richard Montgomery materialized like a bad memory. His Tom Ford suit cost $8,000. Emma knew because she'd seen it in the Neiman Marcus window. Doing the math, automatically 43 weeks of her Walmart wages. His cologne invaded the space between them, something with French words she couldn't pronounce. His hair was silver at the temples now. Distinguished, they'd call it. Though her grandfather had gone silver from the stress of building something from nothing, while Richard's came from the stress of maintaining what he'd taken. Security issue. Mr. Montgomery. The guard straightened like a soldier finding his spine. This young woman claims. Richard's eyes found her. Gray eyes. The color of winter ice. For one moment, just one. Something flickered there. Recognition? No. Amusement. The kind of look rich kids gave her in high school when she'd paid for lunch with food stamps. Let me guess. Reporter, blogger, or wait. His smile widened, showing teeth that cost more than Mrs. Chen's monthly medical bills. The shareholders meeting. You're one of those activist protesters. What is it this time? The environment labor practices. Though usually your type chains themselves to the doors, not walk through them. I'm Emma Sullivan. Her voice came out steadier than her hands. Thomas Sullivan's granddaughter. The lobby seemed to inhale collectively. Someone dropped a phone. It clattered on marble like bones. Richard's laugh started low, built to something that bounced off the 40-foot ceiling. Thomas Sullivan's granddaughter. He tasted each syllable. Security. Check your list for fairy tale princesses while you're at it. Maybe Cinderella's running late. The Zhao delegation had stopped to watch. Jennifer Knox raised her phone. Recording. This would be on social media in minutes. Mr. Montgomery? Emma kept her voice level, though her cheeks burned like she'd been slapped. I own shares in this company. 40% to be exact. 40%. Richard plucked the folder from her hands before she could react. His manicured fingers, she noticed the $300 manicure because numbers always stuck, flipped through pages with theatrical slowness. These, he held one up to the light streaming through the floor-to-ceiling windows. The watermark's crooked. What did this cost you at Kinko's $20.30 if you splurged for the premium paper? Someone laughed. Then another. The sound rippled through the growing crowd like a stone dropped in still water. Emma's throat tightened. Her grandfather's fountain pen felt heavy in her pocket. Though I admire the effort, Richard continued, playing to his audience now. The research. You even got the old man's signature close. Not perfect, but close. What's the end game here? Sweetheart, 15 minutes of fame, a payoff to go away. Or are you actually delusional enough to think, Mr. Montgomery? The voice cut through the lobby like a scalpel through skin. Dorothy Hayes emerged from the executive elevator. Navy Chanel suit, pearls that belonged in a museum, shoes that whispered rather than clicked. The crowd parted like she was Moses and they were the Red Sea. "We have a situation." Her voice could have frozen vodka in July. Richard's smile flickered like a bad bulb. "Dorothy, perfect timing. We have a small security issue. This young woman. The merger vote cannot proceed." Dorothy's words were bullets, each one finding its mark. "The board is waiting. We need the consent of the 40% trust shareholder. The trust shares—" Richard's hand holding Emma's documents trembled slightly. "Those have been dormant for not dormant. Protected. Waiting." Dorothy's gaze shifted to Emma, and something there softened like ice accepting the first crack of spring. Until Thomas Sullivan's heir reached the age specified in his will, 19 years old. She extended one manicured hand toward Emma. "Ms. Sullivan, we've been expecting you." The folder slipped from Richard's fingers, papers scattered across marble like dead leaves. The coffee stains on them looked like old blood in the morning light. "That's impossible." His voice cracked on the second syllable. "Authenticated this morning at 7 a.m. by 3 independent firms." Dorothy's tone could have performed surgery. "Ms. Emma Sullivan is the sole beneficiary of her grandfather's 40% stake in Innovate Global, the controlling interest." She's so sorry." Richard's face drained of color so fast Emma wondered if hearts could actually stop from surprise. His mouth opened, closed, opened again. No sound. Emma knelt, gathering the scattered papers one by one. Her hands didn't shake anymore. The boardroom occupied the entire 40th floor, its windows offering a view of Denver that made you feel like God if you forgot you were just another mortal paying rent. Emma stepped inside and stopped. Her grandfather's portrait was gone. The wall where it had hung for 20 years now displayed an abstract painting that probably cost more than her trailer. "Where is it?" She turned to Dorothy. "Where's my grandfather's portrait?" "Storage," Richard said from behind them. He'd recovered his composure in the elevator, straightened his tie, rebuilt his corporate mask. "We needed the space for the Kandinsky. It's worth $12 million. $12 million. Emma did the math automatically. 400,000 meals at the food bank where she volunteered, 600 full cancer treatments for patients like Mrs. Chen, 2,400 kids through college on full scholarships. The board members were already seated around the obsidian table that reflected their faces like dark water. Frank Morrison sat at the far end, oxygen tube discreet under his nose. 71 years old, skin like parchment paper, but his eyes were sharp as the day he'd helped Bill Sullivan incorporate their dream in this very room. He stood when Emma entered. Nobody else did. "You look like him," Frank said. "Same stubborn chin." Sarah Chen Williams, the CFO, didn't look up from her laptop. 45, divorced, raising 2 kids alone. She'd climbed the corporate ladder with her fingernails. Her loyalty was to survival, not sentiment. The other board members, Harrison, Patel, Kroger, and Yamamoto, watched Emma like she was a virus that might spread. "This is ridiculous," Richard began. "A teenager can't just walk in here and—" "She's not walking in," Dorothy interrupted. "She owns 40% of this company, super voting shares. According to the trust documents." The room went silent. Super voting shares meant each of Emma's shares counted as 10 regular votes. In practical terms, she could override any board decision. "That's impossible." Sarah finally looked up. "I've reviewed every share allocation. There are no super voting provisions." Dorothy placed a document on the table. The thud seemed to echo. "Filed with the Delaware Secretary of State 20 years ago, 1 week before Mr. Montgomery joined the company as CFO." She slid another paper across the obsidian surface. "Signed by all original board members, including you, Frank." Frank nodded slowly. Bill knew this day would come. He knew someone would try to take his company in a direction that betrayed its purpose. Its purpose? Richard's voice climbed half an octave. Its purpose is to make money. That's what companies do. Not Bill's company, Frank said. Bill built this for the people who worked here. Every janitor, every secretary, every programmer. Family. He called them. Family doesn't pay dividends, Harrison cut in. He'd been on the board 6 years, brought in by Richard. The Zhao offer is $4.2 billion. That's a 60% premium on current valuation. And 500 layoffs, Emma said. Her voice sounded strange in the room. Too young, too soft. But she continued. 500 families losing their income. I've read the merger documents. You've read, Richard laughed. But it came out wrong. Like a bark. You're 19. You stock shelves at Walmart. You think scanning a few documents makes you qualified to make billion-dollar decisions? I think, Emma said slowly, that my grandfather left me these shares for a reason. Your grandfather is dead. Richard's mask finally cracked completely. 5 years dead. The world moved on. Technology moved on. This isn't 1999 anymore, when 5 guys in a garage could change the world with good intentions and hard work. This is corporate reality. Zhao Industries has the infrastructure we need for global expansion. They also have a track record of gutting companies, Emma said. Technotron, 2018, purchased for $2 billion, stripped for parts, 800 people unemployed within 6 months. Maker Industries, 2020, bought for $5 billion, entire R&D department eliminated, moved operations to Shanghai. Dynamo Corp, last year. How do you... Sarah started. I read. Emma met her gaze. Library has free Wi-Fi and access to business journals. I've been preparing for this day for 3 years. Dorothy's expression shifted, something like pride flickering across her professional mask. Preparing, Richard stood, both palms flat on the table. You think 3 years of reading makes you prepared? I've been running this company for 15 years. I took us from 100 million valuation to billions. I made your grandfather's dream into reality. You made it into something he wouldn't recognize, Frank said quietly. Bill would weep to see what you've done. What I've done? Richard's face flushed red. I've made everyone in this room rich, including you. Frank, your shares are worth 40 million now. 40 million you wouldn't have if I hadn't what? Emma asked. Hadn't pushed my grandfather out. Hadn't convinced the board he was too sick to lead when the first diagnosis came. Hadn't changed the bylaws while he was in chemotherapy. The room went silent again. Even the air conditioning seemed to pause. Where did you hear that? Richard's voice dropped to almost a whisper. Grandfather's journals. He wrote everything down. Every meeting, every betrayal, every knife in his back. Emma pulled out a leather notebook, its pages yellowed with age. October 15th, 2019. Richard brought the buyout offer while I was at treatment. Didn't think I'd make it back in time for the vote. Surprise on his face when I walked in was worth the pain of leaving the hospital early. Sarah's fingers had stopped moving on her keyboard. Harrison and Patel exchanged glances. Yamamoto studied his reflection in the obsidian table. That's not... Richard started. November 3rd, 2019. Emma continued reading. Richard suggested I step down for health reasons. Says it would be best for the company. Maybe he's right. But not yet. Not until I secure Emma's future. The trust documents are filed. He doesn't know about the super voting provisions. Stop, Richard said. December 21st, 2019. Richard visited me at hospice today. Brought flowers, white lilies, like for a funeral. We both knew what he was really there for. Wanted me to sign over voting rights. I told him about Emma instead. Told him she existed. Should have seen his face. I said stop. Richard's fist hit the table. The sound echoed like a gunshot. The last entry, Emma said, her voice steady despite the tears threatening at the corners of her eyes. January 2nd, 2020. 3 days before he died. I forgive Richard. He was hungry once. Like I was. Hunger makes us do things. But Emma won't be hungry. Emma will have choices. Emma will choose right. Frank Morrison pulled out a handkerchief, dabbed at his eyes. Even Sarah looked affected, her corporate mask slipping. This is emotional manipulation, Harrison said, but his voice lacked conviction. This is truth, Dorothy said. And the truth is, without Ms. Sullivan's consent, the merger cannot proceed. The trust provisions are clear. Any fundamental change to the company structure requires the approval of the supervoting shareholder. Then we'll contest it, Richard said. Tie it up in court for years. By the time it's resolved, Zhao will have moved on to another acquisition and you'll have destroyed any chance of a premium buyout. Dorothy said. The board could, of course, vote to remove you as CEO for failing to secure this deal. Richard looked around the table. Harrison avoided his gaze. Patel studied his phone. Kroger and Yamamoto might as well have been statues. I need time, Richard said finally. We all do. This is unexpected. Emma looked at the empty space where her grandfather's portrait should hang. 48 hours, she said. You have 48 hours to convince me why I should let you sell my grandfather's dream to a company that will destroy it. 48 hours. Richard laughed, but it was hollow. What can change in 48 hours? Everything, Emma said. She thought of her grandfather, dying in hospice, still believing in redemption. Everything can change. Frank Morrison stood, the effort visible in the way he gripped the table. I move to postpone the merger vote for 48 hours. Seconded, Sarah said, surprising everyone, including herself. All in favor, Dorothy asked. Every hand rose except Richard's. Motion carried, Dorothy announced. We reconvene in 48 hours. Emma turned to leave, then stopped. Mr. Montgomery, the portrait of my grandfather. I want it rehung before the next meeting. That's not negotiable, Emma said. She met his gaze, held it. 48 hours. She walked out, Dorothy beside her, leaving Richard standing alone in a room full of people who suddenly seemed very interested in studying their phones, their laptops, anything but the man who'd thought he owned everything. The elevator doors closed on Richard's face, and Emma finally allowed herself to breathe. The executive floor after hours felt like a mausoleum. Emma's borrowed shoes echoed in the empty hallway as Dorothy led her past darkened offices. They stopped at a door marked only with a number 4001. Dorothy produced a key that looked older than Emma. Your grandfather's original office, Dorothy said. Richard had it sealed 5 years ago. The lock protested but turned. Inside, time had stopped in January 2020. Bill Sullivan's coffee mug still sat on the desk, a ring of dried coffee at the bottom. The walls were covered with photos, not corporate achievements, but people. Emma recognized younger versions of current employees. There was Marcus Thompson in his army uniform before he became head of security. Bobby Martinez as a skinny kid at a company picnic, maybe 10 years old, his father's arm around him. Emma's fingers traced across the desk, finding grooves worn by her grandfather's elbows during countless late nights. In the top drawer, locked but yielding to the same old key, lay 3 manila folders marked confidential in her grandfather's shaky handwriting. The first folder made her stomach clench. Richard Montgomery, personal file. Inside, photographs from the 1990s, Richard at 22, hollow-cheeked, standing outside a homeless shelter, a police report for vagrancy, a handwritten note from Bill Sullivan. Hired May 15, 1999. Brilliant mind, desperate circumstances. Reminds me of myself at that age. Beneath that, pay stubs showing Bill had paid Richard's salary personally for the first 2 years, not from company funds. Medical records showing treatment for malnutrition, paid by W. Sullivan, personal account. A college transcript. Richard had dropped out one semester before graduation. Couldn't afford to continue. Bill had paid for him to finish his degree through night school. "My God," Emma whispered. "Grandfather saved him." "And Richard knew it," Dorothy said quietly. "That's what makes the betrayal worse." The second folder was labeled Succession Planning. Emma opened it to find letters. Dozens of them. All addressed to her but never sent. Different dates, different stages of her grandfather's illness. The last one, dated a week before his death, was still sealed. Emma's fingers trembled as she opened it. "My dear Emma, if you're reading this, you're in my office, which means Dorothy found you and brought you here. Yes, I knew Dorothy was your mother. I've known for 15 years. She didn't abandon you, pequeña. She gave you to me because she was 17 and terrified, and I promised to love you like my own. She's watched over you ever since, never asking for anything, never revealing herself. That takes a strength I'm not sure I possess. About Richard, I know what he's done. Every backstab, every maneuver, every small betrayal adding up to a complete takeover. I let him think he was winning because I needed him to show his true nature to the board. They wouldn't have believed me otherwise. He was too charming, too successful. They needed to see him choose money over people. The company is yours now, but not to make you rich. You've been poor. Emma, you know what it means to choose between food and medicine, heat and electricity. That's why I'm leaving this to you, because you'll remember the 500 families who depend on their jobs when Richard only sees numbers on a spreadsheet. There's something else. Check the bottom drawer. Emma found the drawer, stuck from disuse. Inside was another folder, Project Haven. "What's Project Haven?" she asked Dorothy. Dorothy's face went pale. "That was supposed to be destroyed. Bill promised the board." Emma opened it. Inside were architectural plans for employee housing on company land, a healthcare center, a daycare, an entire community built around the idea that companies should take care of their workers cradle to grave. The budget was staggering, $400 million, exactly what Emma's shares were worth in the Zhao deal. "He wanted to build a town," Emma said. "He wanted to build a future," Dorothy corrected. The board called him insane, socialist. Richard led the charge against it, said it would bankrupt the company. Would it? No. Bill had run the numbers 1,000 times. It would have reduced employee turnover to near zero, increased productivity by 40%, long term. It would have saved money, but long-term thinking doesn't juice quarterly earnings. Emma sat in her grandfather's chair. It creaked the same way her bed did in the trailer. She pulled out the third folder. This one was unmarked. Inside, a single document, Richard's original employment contract. At the bottom, below Richard's desperate signature, Bill had written in pencil, "Everyone deserves a second chance." Bobby Martinez was emptying trash cans on the 32nd floor when Emma found him. 22 years old, community college at night, working since he was 16 to support his mother after his father died. His father had been a programmer at Innovate Global, one of the original employees. "Ms. Sullivan," Bobby nearly dropped his trash bag. "What are you doing here? It's past midnight." "Looking for you," Emma said. "I need to know something. The employees here. What do they think about the merger?" Bobby glanced around nervously. "We're not supposed to talk about—" "Please." He set down his supplies. "They're terrified. 500 pink slips. But nobody knows who. People are already pulling their kids from private school, canceling vacations, selling second cars. Maria in accounting. She's got a special needs son. The therapy costs $20,000 a year. If she loses this job, no other insurance will cover him." "What about Richard? Do people trust him?" Bobby laughed, but it was bitter. "Montgomery. He doesn't even know our names. Calls me, 'Hey you,' when he passes. My dad worked here 20 years, died at his desk from a heart attack, and Montgomery sent a form letter to the funeral. Your grandfather, though—" Bobby's voice caught. "Your grandfather came to our house, sat with my mom, Made sure she got Dad's full pension, plus survivor benefits that weren't even in the contract. That's the difference. If the employees could vote on the merger, they'd kill it in a heartbeat. But we don't get votes. We just get pink slips. Emma thanked him and headed to the parking garage. Her 1998 Honda Civic looked like a toy next to the Teslas and BMWs. As she fumbled for her keys, footsteps echoed behind her. Richard emerged from the shadows. His tie was loose, his perfect hair disheveled. He held a bottle of whiskey. Macallan, she noted. 25 years old, worth more than her monthly rent. "Your grandfather gave me this," he said, voice slurred slightly. "When I made CFO, said we'd drink it together when the company went public." He took a swig directly from the bottle. "Never got the chance." "You pushed him out before the IPO," Emma said evenly. "I made him rich," Richard shouted, his voice bouncing off concrete. "The IPO I orchestrated made him worth $200 million. I made everyone rich. Except the 500 people you're about to fire." Richard laughed, ugly and sharp. "You think this is about 500 jobs? Zhao will cut 500 now. Then another 1,000 in year 2. By year 5, this whole operation moves to Shanghai. That's the game, little girl. That's how global capitalism works." "Then why are you doing it?" "Because if I don't, someone else will. Harrison's already talking to private equity. Kroger's shopping us to the Europeans. At least with Zhao, I walk away with enough to never think about this place again. This place that saved you." Richard's face darkened. "Don't. You don't know. I found the files, the photos, the records. Grandfather pulled you off the streets. He pulled me off the streets to be his pet." Richard threw the bottle. It shattered against a pillar, whiskey running down concrete like amber tears. His charity case, his proof that capitalism could have a heart. "Do you know what it's like to sit in board meetings knowing everyone sees you as Bill's rescue puppy? So you bit the hand that fed you. I took what I earned, 15 years of 18-hour days. 15 years of building this company while Bill played saint. He could afford to care about everyone because I was the one making the hard choices. Firing underperformers. Cutting inefficient departments. Being the villain so he could be the hero." "He loved you," Emma said quietly. "Like a son." Richard's legs seemed to give out. He sat hard on the garage floor, expensive suit against oil-stained concrete. "I know," he whispered. "That's the worst part. I know." Dorothy was waiting in her Mercedes outside Emma's trailer at 3 a.m. She rolled down the window as Emma parked. "We need to talk," Dorothy said. "About you being my mother." Dorothy's composure finally cracked completely. "How did you—" "Grandfather's letter. He knew all along." They sat in Dorothy's car, engine off, watching the sunrise paint the mountains pink. Dorothy spoke in stops and starts, like an engine trying to turn over in winter, about being 17 and pregnant, about her parents' ultimatum adoption or the streets, about choosing Bill Sullivan because she'd read about his company, his values, about watching Emma from afar for 19 years, anonymous guardian angel, never mother. "I paid for things," Dorothy said. "Medical bills, the laptop, those shoes you're wearing. But I couldn't. Why work for Richard? Why stay at the company? To protect you. To make sure when this day came, the documents would be rock solid. Richard's tried 3 times to invalidate the trust. I stopped him every time. He knows you're my mother." "No. Nobody does except Frank Morrison, and he's dying too fast to tell anyone." Emma studied this stranger who'd given birth to her. Dorothy's hands shook slightly, the only sign of vulnerability in her perfect exterior. "After the vote," Emma said. "After all this is over, maybe we could have coffee." Dorothy's tears came silently, professionally, like everything else she did. "I'd like that." Sarah Chen Williams was already at her desk when the sun rose properly, as she had been every morning for 10 years. Single mother, 2 kids, one with special needs. She'd learned to function on 4 hours of sleep and pharmaceutical-grade coffee. Emma knocked on her door frame. "Can we talk?" Sarah looked up, surprised. "The princess visits the counting house." "I need to understand the numbers. The real numbers, not what Richard presents to the board." Sarah studied her for a long moment, then gestured to a chair. "What do you want to know?" "Everything. Starting with why you seconded the motion to delay yesterday." Sarah pulled up a spreadsheet, then another, then another. "Because Richard's lying. The company's not in trouble. We're having our best year ever. The merger isn't necessary. It's opportunistic." "Then why is the board considering it?" "Because Zhao's offering a 60% premium. Most of these board members are retirement age. They want to cash out, play golf, buy yachts. They don't care what happens after they're gone." "But you're 45. You've got 20 years of career left." Sarah's laugh was bitter. "You think Zhao keeps American CFOs? I've got 6 months. Tops. Then I'm job hunting with a special needs kid who requires continuity of care. You know what Cobra costs for a family with pre-existing conditions, $8,000 a month. What if I could guarantee your job and everyone else's?" Sarah leaned back. "How even with super voting shares, you can't force operational decisions." Emma pulled out the Project Haven folder. "What if we didn't need Zhao? What if we could build something better?" Sarah's eyes widened as she read. This is revolutionary, but the capital requirements. 400 million, exactly what my shares are worth in the merger. You'd give up $400 million. I'd invest it. In people, in families, in a different kind of capitalism." Sarah was quiet for a long moment, calculating, not just numbers, but possibilities. The board would revolt. Richard would. "Richard's breaking. I saw him last night. He's ready to crack completely. Or he's ready to destroy everything. Desperate men do desperate things." Emma thought about Richard on the garage floor, Bill's whiskey running down concrete like blood. Then we'd better be ready with something better than desperation. Sarah pulled up another screen, this one showing employee records. 500 names on the termination list. I know every one. Jennifer in receivables, putting her husband through cancer treatment. Jorge in IT, first in his family to graduate college, supporting his parents. Amy in marketing, adopted 3 special needs kids. "We're going to save them all," Emma said. "How can you be so sure?" Emma thought about her grandfather's letter, about Dorothy's 19 years of silent protection, about Bobby's father dying at his desk, about Richard crying over spilled whiskey. "Because everybody deserves a second chance, even Richard." Sarah stared at her. "You're either naive or revolutionary." "Maybe both," Emma said. "Is that enough?" Sarah looked at the 500 names on her screen, then at Project Haven, then at Emma's young, determined face. "It's going to have to be. Frank Morrison was feeding pigeons on the roof garden when Emma found him, 71 years old, 6 months to live according to the oncologist, but his eyes were still sharp as the day he'd helped Bill Sullivan incorporate their dream. "I've been waiting for you," he said, not turning around. "Bill said you'd come here. Said you'd need to see the city to understand what you're fighting for." Denver sprawled below them, afternoon sun turning glass to gold. From here, you could see everything: the business district, the suburbs where employees lived, the mountains that watched over it all. 20,000 people, Frank said. "That's how many lives depend on this company, directly or indirectly. Employees, families, suppliers, contractors. 20,000 souls, and Richard sees only dollars." "He's broken," Emma said. "I saw him last night." Broken men are dangerous. They think they have nothing left to lose. Or maybe they're finally ready to be rebuilt. Frank turned to her, studied her with eyes that had seen 6 decades of business warfare. "You really believe in redemption?" "Grandfather did. Bill was a better man than most, better than me, I've done things, Emma, to protect this company, to protect Bill's legacy. Things I'm not proud of. Like what? Frank pulled out an envelope, sealed, with Richard's name on it. The nuclear option. Everything Richard doesn't want revealed. The bribes to get the Singapore facility approved. The environmental reports he buried. The sexual harassment settlements he paid with company funds without board approval. Enough to destroy him completely. Emma took the envelope, felt its weight. You've had this all along. 3 years, waiting for the right moment. Why didn't you use it? Because Bill asked me not to. Said Richard would hang himself eventually. No need for us to provide the rope. But now, with the merger, with you here, maybe it's time. Emma looked at the envelope, then at the city below. 20,000 souls. She thought about Mrs. Chen in her trailer, oxygen machine wheezing, Bobby working 3 jobs to get through college, Sarah's special needs son, Richard, broken on a garage floor. She tore the envelope in half, then quarters, then smaller pieces, letting them fall like snow over Denver. Frank gasped. Emma, what are you? We're not going to destroy him. We're going to save him. And by saving him, we save everyone. You can't save someone who doesn't want to be saved. Then we make him want it. We show him what Bill saw in him 25 years ago. Not the desperate kid on the streets, but the brilliant mind that could help build something magnificent. Frank shook his head. You're as crazy as your grandfather. Good, Emma said. Sanity hasn't been working. She left Frank on the roof, feeding his pigeons, watching pieces of Richard's sins float away on the wind like possibility. The boardroom was packed for the second meeting. Word had leaked. It always did. And now representatives from 3 financial newspapers sat in the back row, phones ready. The Zhao delegation had doubled in size, their lead negotiator, Chen Wei, sitting with the stillness of a predator waiting for prey to make a mistake. Emma entered at exactly 9 a.m., 48 hours after she'd first walked through these doors. She wore the same borrowed shoes, but a new thrift store suit, navy blue, almost fitting, $30 from Goodwill. Her grandfather's portrait was back on the wall, watching over the proceedings with eyes that seemed alive in the morning light. Richard looked like he hadn't slept. His usual perfect presentation was cracked, stubble showed on his jaw, his tie was off-center, and his hands trembled slightly as he shuffled papers. The smell of whiskey lingered beneath his cologne. Before we begin, Dorothy announced, Ms. Sullivan has requested to present her vision for the company. Vision? Harrison practically spat the word. She's a teenager. What vision could she possibly? The floor is yours, Ms. Sullivan. Dorothy cut him off. Emma stood. Her knees shook, but her voice came out steady. 48 hours ago, you laughed at me in the lobby downstairs. Poor girl. Thrift store clothes, claiming to be somebody. I understand why. I look like nobody. I am nobody. Really. Just a girl from a trailer park who happens to have inherited something valuable. She clicked a remote. The screen behind her came to life, showing a photograph, 5 young men in a garage. Computers cobbled together from spare parts. Bill Sullivan in the center, young and hungry. This was Innovate Global 25 years ago. My grandfather, Frank Morrison, and 3 other dreamers who believed technology could improve lives. Not stock prices, lives. She clicked again. This is Innovate Global today. The screen showed the gleaming tower, but also something else, a heat map of employee turnover. Red zones bleeding across departments like wounds. 40% turnover in the last 2 years. Emma continued. That's not normal attrition. That's hemorrhaging. People don't leave jobs, they leave cultures. And the culture my grandfather built is dying. The culture your grandfather built couldn't compete globally. Richard interjected, his voice rough. Sentiment doesn't scale. Doesn't it? Emma clicked again. Project Haven appeared on screen. This was my grandfather's last project. Employee housing on company land, healthcare center, daycare, school, a community built on the principle that companies and employees rise together. Chen Wei leaned forward, speaking for the first time. Communist ideology failed. Ms. Sullivan, the free market won. This isn't communism, Emma said. It's investment. Every employee who lives in Haven signs a 10-year commitment. In exchange, they get housing at 30% below market rate, free healthcare, free daycare, and their children get college scholarships. The company gets zero turnover, increased productivity, and a competitive advantage no one can match loyalty. The numbers don't work, Sarah said, though her tone suggested she wished they did. 400 million initial investment, ongoing operational costs. I've run the numbers. Emma clicked again. A spreadsheet appeared, dense with calculations. Sarah, you said employee turnover costs us 50 million annually in training and lost productivity. Healthcare benefits cost another 80 million, with employees still paying 30% out of pocket. Daycare subsidies, recruitment costs, the inefficiencies of having employees commute from across the city. It adds up to 200 million in hidden costs annually. Sarah pulled up her laptop, fingers flying across keys. These projections assume 100% participation. Start with 20%. Volunteers only. The ones with the most to gain. Single parents. Families with special needs children. Recent graduates drowning in student loans. Emma clicked to another slide. Phase 1, 100 families. Cost 40 million. If it works, we scale. If it doesn't, we've still built housing that appreciates in value. This is insane, Harrison said. We have a bird in hand with Zhao, 4.2 billion, which values the company at less than its potential. Emma interrupted. Mr. Wei, your company plans to cut 500 jobs immediately, correct? Chen Wei's expression didn't change. Efficiency requires optimization. And in year 2, how many more cuts? Silence. I've read your history. Emma continued. Every acquisition follows the same pattern. Buy, cut, offshore, strip. You're not builders. You're harvesters. You take what others grew and monetize it until nothing's left but a brand name and a tax ID number. That's business, Chen Wei said simply. That's one kind of business. Emma turned to the board. But there's another kind. The kind my grandfather believed in. The kind that recognizes companies aren't just legal entities. They're collections of human potential. Richard stood suddenly, his chair scraping against the floor. Enough. This is a fantasy. A child's fantasy about how the world should work. He turned to Emma, and for a moment, his mask dropped completely. She saw not the corporate titan, but the desperate 22-year-old her grandfather had saved. Your grandfather was a dreamer, Emma. Dreams don't survive reality, but dreamers do, Frank said quietly. Bill survived. You survived. Richard, because Bill dreamed you could be more than a homeless dropout. Richard's face went white. That's not June 1999, Frank continued. Bill found you sleeping in the alley behind our first office. You'd been beaten, robbed, left for dead. He didn't call the police. He called an ambulance, paid for your treatment, then offered you a job. Not charity, a job. Because he saw something in you. The room had gone completely silent. Even the reporters had stopped typing. He saw brilliance, Frank said. And he was right. You transformed this company. Richard, your financial strategies, your market insights, your ruthless efficiency. They built the empire. But somewhere along the way, you forgot why Bill saved you. He saved me to be his pet, Richard said, but the words lacked conviction now. No, Dorothy spoke up. I was there. I was Bill's assistant then, fresh out of law school. He saved you because he saw himself in you. The hunger, the desperation, the brilliance that poverty sharpens like a knife. He said, Dorothy, that kid's going to change the world if someone just gives him a chance. Richard sank into his chair. And I betrayed him. Yes, Emma said simply. You did. But he forgave you. She pulled out the letter from her grandfather, the one she'd found in his desk. Would you like me to read what he wrote about you? Richard's hands covered his face. No, please. He said you were the son he never had. He said watching you succeed was worth every betrayal because success would eventually teach you what failure never could, that winning alone isn't enough. Stop. He said he knew about the Swiss accounts, the side deals, the skimming. He knew and he let you because he believed you'd eventually realize money couldn't fill the hole inside you. Stop. He said he loved you. Richard broke, not dramatically, not with sobs or wails, but quietly, like a dam developing hairline cracks. Tears leaked through his fingers. His shoulders shook. Chen Wei stood. This is unprofessional. We came to close a deal, not watch therapy. Ms. Sullivan, you have two choices. Accept our offer or watch your company be devoured by market forces. Sentiment doesn't prevent bankruptcy. You're right, Emma said. Sentiment doesn't, but innovation does. And I'm not just talking about technology. She clicked the remote one more time. A new slide appeared. The Haven Initiative, a new model for American business. We don't just build employee housing, Emma continued. We license the model. Every company struggling with turnover, every corporation losing talent to Silicon Valley, every business watching their best employees burn out from trying to balance life and work, we sell them the blueprint. Sarah's fingers stopped moving on her keyboard. You want to franchise compassion. I want to scale humanity, Emma corrected. Imagine if every major corporation in America built Haven communities, not just housing, but genuine communities where employees own stakes, where their children grow up together, where retirement doesn't mean exile, but elder status in a place you helped build. That would fundamentally change the relationship between capital and labor, Yamamoto said, speaking for the first time. Yes, Emma said simply. It would. The unions would resist, Kroger pointed out. They'd see it as company towns, as a return to the bad old days of corporate control. Not if employees own their houses after 10 years. Not if they sit on the community board. Not if their children get free college regardless of whether they follow their parents into the company. Emma looked at each board member in turn. This isn't about control. It's about commitment. Both ways. Richard lifted his head. His face was wrecked. Makeup running. Carefully constructed image destroyed. It'll never work. The market won't allow it. Shareholders want quarterly returns, not 10-year commitments. Then we go private, Emma said. The room erupted. Everyone talking at once, voices climbing over each other. Chen Wei actually smiled, the expression sharp as winter. Dorothy called for order. When the room settled, Emma continued. I propose we refuse the Zhao offer and instead take the company private. Use my 40% as collateral for a leveraged buyout. Frank, I know you've been approached by private equity firms who'd back a play like this. Frank nodded slowly. Silver Lake would do it. So would KKR. They've been circling for years, waiting for an opportunity. The valuation would be lower, Sarah warned. Maybe $3 billion instead of 4.2. But we'd control our destiny, Emma said. We could build Haven. We could prove the model. And in 10 years, when we go public again, we won't just be a tech company, though we'll be the future of how companies and employees coexist. Harrison laughed, ugly and short. This is insanity. You're asking us to give up guaranteed wealth for a sociology experiment. I'm asking you to be pioneers, Emma corrected. To be remembered as the board that changed American business forever. Or you can take Chen Wei's money, retire to your golf courses, and be forgotten by history. I'd rather be rich and forgotten than poor and remembered, Harrison shot back. Would you? Emma turned to face him directly. Mr. Harrison, you're 63 years old. You have, actuarially speaking, 15 years left. You have 40 million in stock options. What's the difference between 40 million and 60 million when you're dead? My children will inherit either way. But what else will they inherit? A name associated with the board that sold out American workers to Chinese conglomerate, or a name associated with the revolution in corporate responsibility. Harrison had no answer. Chen Wei gathered his papers. Ms. Sullivan, you're naive. The world doesn't work on idealism. It works on power and profit. Your grandfather learned that lesson too late. Don't repeat his mistake. My grandfather died believing in something better, Emma said. That's not a mistake. That's a legacy. Chen Wei headed for the door, his delegation following. At the threshold, he turned back. You have 1 hour to accept our offer. After that, we move to hostile takeover. Your super voting shares won't protect you from bankruptcy when we target your suppliers, your customers, your credit lines. We know how to destroy companies that won't sell. Ms. Sullivan, ask the board members about Technotron's fate when they refused us. The door closed with a sound like judgment. The boardroom sat in silence. Emma could hear her own heartbeat, could feel the weight of 20,000 employees' futures on her 19-year-old shoulders. Well, Frank said finally, I guess we have an hour to decide if we're dreamers or realists. We're dead if we refuse, Harrison said. Chen Wei doesn't make empty threats. We're dead if we accept, Emma countered. Maybe not today, maybe not tomorrow, but soon. The company my grandfather built will be gutted, the employees scattered, the dream extinguished. Richard stood slowly, like an old man feeling his age. There's a third option. Everyone turned to him. I resign, he said simply. Effective immediately. My shares, my options, my golden parachute. I forfeit it all. That's roughly 180 million that could fund Emma's project without needing private equity. The room went silent again. But it was a different kind of silence, the kind that comes before earthquakes. You'd do that? Emma asked. Richard met her eyes. For the first time since she'd known him, he looked honest. Your grandfather saved me once. Maybe it's time I saved something too. This is unprecedented, Dorothy said. The legal implications. I don't care about legal implications, Richard interrupted. I care about... He stopped, struggled, then continued. I care about deserving the second chance Bill gave me, even if it's 25 years late. Sarah pulled up her laptop. If Richard forfeits his compensation package, and we restructure the debt, and we get even modest private equity backing, her fingers flew across the keys. It could work, barely, with no margin for error, but it could work. I'm in, Frank said. I've got 6 months to live. I'd rather spend it building Bill's dream than counting money I'll never spend. One by one, eyes turned to the other board members. Patel shifted uncomfortably. Kroger studied his hands. Yamamoto seemed fascinated by the ceiling. Harrison stood. You're all insane. I vote to accept the Zhao offer. I vote against, Frank said. Against, Emma said. I abstain, Sarah said, which was as close to support as she could offer without violating her fiduciary duty. Kroger, Patel, and Yamamoto voted to accept. Dorothy tallied the votes. With standard voting, the motion to accept Zhao's offer passes 4-2 with 1 abstention. However, with Ms. Sullivan's super voting shares counted, the motion fails by a margin of 60%. Harrison stood so fast his chair tipped over. This is a coup, a child and a dying man hijacking a billion-dollar company. I'll sue. We'll all sue. On what grounds? Dorothy asked calmly. The super voting provisions are legal and binding. Ms. Sullivan is exercising her rights as specified in the trust documents. Then I resign from this board, Harrison spat. Effective immediately. Good luck explaining to the press why your board is collapsing. He stormed out. Kroger followed. Patel hesitated, then left as well. Yamamoto remained seated, studying Emma with an unreadable expression. Mr. Yamamoto, Dorothy prompted. My grandfather started Yamamoto Electronics in a garage in San Francisco, he said quietly. 1946. Everyone said a Japanese man couldn't succeed in post-war America. He proved them wrong by treating every employee like family. The company thrived until my father sold it to a conglomerate in 1987. It was stripped and destroyed within 5 years. He stood, straightened his tie. I vote against the Zhao offer, and I pledge 10 million of my personal funds to the Haven Initiative. Emma felt her knees buckle slightly. Frank caught her elbow, steadied her. The motion fails, Dorothy announced unnecessarily. The Zhao offer is rejected. Through the windows, they could see Chenwei's motorcade pulling away from the building. Emma watched until the last black SUV disappeared into traffic. Now what? Sarah asked. Now, Richard said, voice steady for the first time in days. We build something impossible. Together, Emma asked him. Richard looked at Bill Sullivan's portrait, then at Emma, then out at the city where 20,000 souls waited to learn their fate. Together, the sun broke through clouds, flooding the boardroom with light that turned everything golden, like possibility, like hope, like the future Bill Sullivan had dreamed of in a garage 25 years ago when he'd believed anything was possible if you just gave people a chance. The boardroom phone rang. Dorothy answered, listened, then hung up. The press is gathering in the lobby. They want a statement about the board resignations and the rejected offer. Emma stood, straightened her thrift store suit, and picked up her grandfather's fountain pen. Then let's give them one. Let's tell them that Innovate Global is about to live up to its name. She headed for the door, then stopped, turned back to Richard. You coming? Richard looked at his Rolex, his Italian suit, his reflection in the polished table. Then he took off the watch, loosened his tie, and smiled. Not his corporate smile, but something real and broken and hopeful. Yeah, he said. I'm coming. They walked out together, the trailer park girl and the fallen CEO, the dying board member and the reluctant CFO, the secret mother and the loyal friend, to face the cameras and tell the world that American business was about to change. Behind them, Bill Sullivan's portrait watched over an empty boardroom filled with golden light and the echo of dreams refusing to die. The press conference had been a disaster. Emma stood in the bathroom of the executive floor, gripping the marble counter until her knuckles went white. Through the door, she could hear Dorothy on the phone, damage control in her voice like ice over breaking glass. Stock's down 30%, Sarah said, entering without knocking. Her tablet showed red numbers bleeding across every metric. Trading suspended twice. The SEC is asking questions about the supervoting shares. 3 major clients called to cancel contracts. Emma's reflection looked back at her, 19 years old, playing dress-up in a thrift store suit, pretending she could save a company she'd inherited 5 minutes ago. The reporters hadn't been kind. Nepotism kills innovation was already trending. Someone had found her Walmart employment records, her trailer park address. The photo of her beat-up Honda next to Richard's Tesla was everywhere. I destroyed it, Emma whispered. Grandfather's whole life's work. And I destroyed it in one morning. You did what you thought was right, Sarah said. But her tone suggested she was reconsidering her abstention. Emma's phone buzzed. A text from Bobby Martinez. My mom's crying. She thinks we're all getting fired. Is it true? Another from Mrs. Chen. Saw you on the news. Sweetie, don't let them break you. A third from an unknown number. Your grandfather would be ashamed. Emma ran to the toilet, barely making it before her breakfast came up. The $5 Denny's special she'd served hundreds of times but could rarely afford herself. Sarah held her hair back, an unexpected kindness from the woman who'd calculated 500 layoffs without blinking. I can't do this, Emma gasped between heaves. I'm 19. I don't know anything about running a company. Neither did Bill when he started, Sarah said quietly. He was 21, selling computers from his trunk. He didn't have 3,000 employees depending on him. No, he had 5. and he failed 12 times before Innovate Global succeeded. Emma sat back on the cold tile floor. What if Richard was right? What if grandfather was just a dreamer and dreams don't survive reality? Sarah was quiet for a moment. Then, can I show you something? She led Emma to the 35th floor, through cubicle farms where employees pretended to work while refreshing news sites. They stopped at a corner cube decorated with children's drawings and a small Mexican flag. Maria Gonzalez, Sarah said. Accounts receivable, single mom, 3 kids, one with cerebral palsy. Maria looked up from her screen, recognized Emma, and stood quickly. Ms. Sullivan, I wanted to say, my father worked with your grandfather. In the early days, he said Bill Sullivan was the only white man who ever looked him in the eye when he spoke. Maria's on the termination list, Sarah said quietly. The Zhao deal included her. Maria's face didn't change, but her hands gripped her desk. I know. We all know. We've known for weeks. Then why stay? Emma asked. Where would I go? My son's therapy is here. His doctors, his school, his whole support system, another job, another city. It would kill him. They moved on. Cube after cube. Sarah introducing the people behind the numbers. Jorge, whose daughter just got into MIT but couldn't afford it without his job. Timothy, 58. Too old to start over. Too young to retire. Jennifer, pregnant with twins. Husband just diagnosed with cancer. 500 stories, Sarah said as they waited for the elevator. 500 families. That's what you're fighting for. Emma's phone rang. Unknown number. She almost didn't answer. Then recognized the 303 area code. Local. Emma Sullivan? The voice was old, careful. This is Arthur Chen. No relation to your neighbor. Before you ask, I own Chen Properties. We hold the mortgage on the Innovate Global building. Emma's stomach clenched. Mr. Chen, your stock price has collapsed. Your board has resigned. Your credit rating just got downgraded. I should be calling in your loan, $500 million, due immediately, which would bankrupt you. But 30 years ago, your grandfather gave me a loan when no bank would touch a Chinese immigrant with big dreams and bad English, interest-free, payback when I could. It took me 10 years, but I paid every penny. Emma closed her eyes, felt tears threaten again. I'm extending your mortgage by 5 years and reducing the rate by 2%. Arthur Chen continued. That should free up about $30 million in cash flow. It's not much, but it's everything. Emma whispered. Thank you. Your grandfather believed in second chances. I'm just passing it forward. Emma hung up to find Frank Morrison leaning against the wall, oxygen tube making him look fragile as rice paper. We have another problem, he said. Richard's office was empty. Not just empty of Richard, empty of everything. The furniture, the awards, the pictures, even the carpet had been pulled up, leaving bare concrete. Marcus Thompson stood in the doorway, confusion on his weathered face. He was here until 3 a.m., Marcus said. Security footage shows him making trips to his car. By morning, everything was gone. Dorothy arrived, breathing hard from running. His resignation letter was on my desk, along with this. She held up a cashier's check. $180 million. His entire net worth, liquidated overnight. Where is he? Emma asked. Nobody knows. His phone's disconnected. His apartment's empty. His ex-wife hasn't heard from him in years. Emma noticed something in the corner. A single piece of paper, trapped under a baseboard. She retrieved it, unfolded it carefully. Richard's handwriting, shaky. I'm not brave enough for redemption. We have to find him, Emma said. We have bigger problems. Dorothy said, without a CEO, the stock will crater further. The board is gone. We're rudderless. Emma's phone buzzed. A message from an unknown number, different from before. A photo attachment. She opened it and gasped. Richard stood on the Aurora Bridge, known locally as the Suicide Bridge. The photo was taken from a distance, but his posture was unmistakable. A man looking down at water far below. "Call 911, Emma said, already running. The Aurora Bridge stretched over Lake Union like a concrete rainbow of despair. Emma abandoned her car in traffic, running the last quarter mile. Richard stood outside the railing, hands gripping metal, body leaning toward the void. Wind whipped his expensive suit, the last expensive thing he owned. "Richard," Emma called from 20 feet away, not daring to get closer. He didn't turn. "Go away, Emma. Let me do one useful thing." "This isn't useful. This is appropriate." He laughed, bitter as winter coffee. The man who betrayed Bill Sullivan, who destroyed his company, removing himself from the equation, sounds useful to me. Grandfather forgave you. I don't forgive me. Emma inched closer. Cars slowed to watch. Someone was definitely filming. Tomorrow's headline wrote itself, "CEO jumps after stock collapse." You know what he said about you in his journal? I don't want to know. He said you were brilliant. He said watching you work was like watching Mozart compose, like watching Einstein theorize. He said you had a gift for betrayal, for transformation. You took a garage startup and made it worth billions, with Chinese money and American layoffs, with innovation and strategic thinking. The methods were wrong, but the talent was real. Richard finally turned his head slightly. What do you want from me? I want you to be the man my grandfather saw, the hungry 22-year-old who just needed a chance. That man died a long time ago. No, he just got lost. Grandfather knew that. That's why he wrote you the second letter. Richard turned fully now, confusion on his face. What second letter? Emma pulled it from her pocket. She'd found it that morning in Bill's desk, sealed, marked for Richard Montgomery, to be delivered when he's ready to come home. He wrote it the day before he died, Emma said. May I read it? Richard's hands tightened on the railing, but he nodded. Dear Richard, Emma read, her voice fighting the wind. If you're hearing this, it means you've finally broken. Good. You needed to break. The man you became wasn't the man I saved, and I've been waiting for that shell to crack so the real you could emerge. Richard made a sound like a wounded animal. Emma continued. I know about everything. The Swiss accounts, the side deals, the betrayals. I let them happen because I needed you to see where that path led, to empty victories and hollow wealth, to loneliness that no amount of money can cure. Stop, Richard whispered. You were my son, Richard. Not legally, not biologically, but in every way that mattered. And like any father, I had to let you fail so you could learn to rise. Tears ran down Richard's face, whipped away by wind. Come home, son. Help Emma build what we dreamed of in the garage, not the money. We achieved that. The mission, to create a company that serves its people as much as they serve it. You know how. You've always known how. You just forgot why. Emma folded the letter, held it out. He signed it. Love, Dad. Richard broke completely. Sobs that came from somewhere deep, somewhere that had been locked for 25 years. His grip on the railing loosened. Richard, Emma said firmly, I'm giving you a choice. Jump and prove you're the failure you think you are, or step back over that railing and help me save the company. But decide now, because there are 500 families waiting to know if they have jobs tomorrow. Richard looked at her, 19 years old, grandfather's stubborn chin, grandmother's kind eyes. Then he looked at the water below, then at the letter in Emma's outstretched hand. He took the letter, read it himself, once, twice, 3 times. Then he climbed back over the railing and collapsed on the sidewalk. sobbing like the 22-year-old boy Bill Sullivan had saved all those years ago. Emma sat beside him on the cold concrete, designer suit and thrift store dress equally irrelevant. Cars honked. Someone definitely filmed. Tomorrow's headline would be different now. Fallen CEO saved by teen heiress. "I don't know how to be good," Richard whispered. "Neither do I," Emma admitted. "But grandfather thought we could learn." They sat there until Dorothy arrived with Marcus, until the police came and went, until the sun began to set over Seattle, painting the water gold like possibility, like hope, like futures that could still be rewritten. Back at the office, the skeleton crew that remained had gathered in the conference room. Sarah had spreadsheets showing the damage, $800 million in market cap erased, 3 major clients gone, credit frozen. "We're technically insolvent," she announced to the room of 20 people, all that remained of the leadership team. "Without Richard's money and the mortgage relief, we have maybe 6 weeks of operating capital. Then we have 6 weeks to prove Haven works," Emma said. "You can't build a community in 6 weeks," someone pointed out. "No, but we can show proof of concept. Start small. 10 families. Volunteers from the most vulnerable employees." Bobby Martinez raised his hand from the back where he'd been emptying trash. "My mom and I volunteer. We're about to lose our apartment anyway." Maria Gonzalez nodded. "Us too. My son needs stability more than I need pride." One by one, hands raised. The security guard with the sick wife, the programmer with the aging parents, the accountant with the special needs daughter. "We'd need at least 10 million just to start," Sarah said. "We don't have it." "I do," said a voice from the doorway. Everyone turned. Richard stood there, looking like he'd been reassembled from broken pieces, imperfect but functional. "The cashier's check," he said. "It's yours, all of it, but on one condition." "What condition?" Emma asked. "I work for free, no salary, no options, no golden parachute. I work to build Haven because I believe in it, or I don't work at all." "You're serious? Your grandfather gave me a second chance when I deserved death. This is my 3rd chance. I won't waste it." Emma looked around the room. These weren't board members or executives. They were janitors and security guards, accountants and programmers, the people who actually made the company run, and they were all nodding. "Then we'd better get to work," she said. "We have 6 weeks to change American business forever." Outside, the city lights began to flicker on, thousands of small lights forming one bright constellation. Somewhere in those lights were 500 families praying for a miracle. Emma pulled out her grandfather's fountain pen, signed the first check for the Haven Initiative, and thought, miracles don't fall from heaven. They're built by broken people who refuse to stay broken. Richard took the check, held it like it was sacred, like it was redemption made tangible. "Your grandfather would be proud," he said. "No," Emma corrected, looking at the ragtag army of believers around the table. "He'd tell us to stop talking and start building." And so they did. The revelation came at 2 a.m. in the archives room, where Emma had been searching for anything that might save them. 5 weeks had passed since the bridge. 5 weeks of 18-hour days, of begging suppliers for extensions, of watching the stock price flatline. The Skeleton Haven housing project sat half-built on company land. 10 families living in construction trailers, waiting for homes that might never be finished. Dorothy found her there, surrounded by boxes dating back to the company's founding. "You need to sleep, Emma. I need a miracle." Emma held up another rejection letter from a potential investor. "That's 47 rejections. We have 8 days of cash left." Dorothy sat on a dusty box. Her usual perfect composure cracked from exhaustion. "There's something I need to tell you." Emma looked up from the papers. Dorothy's hands were shaking. "I've been buying shares," Dorothy said, "for 19 years. Every bonus, every stock option, every spare dollar, bought through shell companies, hidden trusts, foreign corporations. I own 12% of this company." Emma's tired brain took a moment to process. 12%. But that means, combined with your 40%, we have absolute control. We could take the company private without any outside investors. Why didn't you say something weeks ago? Dorothy's laugh was bitter. Because the shares are worth nothing if the company fails. And because... She pulled out a folder, thick with legal documents. Because I bought them with money I stole. The words hung in the dusty air like a confession in church. Not stole, exactly, Dorothy continued. Redirected. Every time Richard did one of his side deals, skimmed from the company, I skimmed from his skim, set up a parallel structure that moved money into share purchases. Bill knew. He approved. We were building a fortress around your inheritance. That's fraud. Yes, if it comes out, I go to prison. But, more importantly, the shares get frozen, investigated, possibly invalidated. Unless what? Dorothy pulled out another document. Unless the person I stole from forgives the debt and validates the transactions retroactively. Richard, who has no idea what we did. Emma stood, paced the narrow aisle between boxes. So we tell him we've been stealing from his theft for 19 years, that your grandfather orchestrated an elaborate financial conspiracy. Richard's fragile. Emma, this could break him permanently. Or it could free him. Before Dorothy could respond, Emma's phone rang. Frank Morrison, at 2 a.m. You need to come to the hospital, Frank said, voice weaker than yesterday. Both of you. And bring Richard. Frank Morrison lay in the hospital bed looking like parchment paper wrapped around bird bones. The cancer had accelerated, doctors hovering with the careful movements of people managing inevitable death. But Frank's eyes were sharp as ever. I'm dying faster than scheduled, he said when they'd all assembled. Emma, Dorothy, Richard, and Sarah. Days, not months. So we're doing this now. Doing what? Richard asked. Frank pulled out a safety deposit key. Box 447, First National. Bill left something for you. Richard. For all of us. Really. But the instruction was clear. Only open it when the company was at its darkest hour. He managed a weak smile. I'd say 8 days from bankruptcy qualifies. Richard took the key like it might burn him. Why didn't you mention this before? Because you weren't ready. You were still the corporate titan, not the broken man ready to be rebuilt. Bill was very specific about the timing. There's more, Frank continued, looking at Dorothy. Tell him everything. Dorothy's face went pale. Frank, I'll be dead before the lawyers can depose me. Tell him now, while I can still witness his response. So Dorothy told him, every detail, every redirected dollar, every shell company. Richard listened with an expression that cycled through shock, rage, disbelief, and finally, something like wonder. You stole from my stealing, he said finally. To protect Emma. To protect Bill's dream, Dorothy corrected. Emma was the instrument, but the dream was the purpose. Richard laughed, not bitter, not angry, but genuinely amused. Bill knew what I was doing and used it against me, or rather for me. That's brilliant. You're not angry? Emma asked. Angry. Richard shook his head. I'm relieved. All those years, I thought I was getting away with something. But Bill was playing a longer game. He was always playing a longer game. The shares, Dorothy said urgently. I need you to sign papers validating the purchases. Retroactive authorization. Without it, where do I sign? Dorothy pulled out the documents. Richard signed without reading, page after page, making legal what had been theft, transforming crime into strategy. Now, Frank said when it was done. The safety deposit box. Go. All of you. I need to rest. As they turned to leave, Frank called Emma back. Your grandmother Rose. She wanted you to know she loved you. I promised I'd tell you when the time was right. You knew my grandmother. I loved your grandmother, before Bill did. But she chose better. Frank closed his eyes. Go. Build what we dreamed. The safety deposit box was larger than standard, requiring 2 bank employees to retrieve. Inside were 3 items: a letter, a USB drive, and a cashier's check that made everyone gasp. $500 million, Sarah whispered. How is this possible? The letter was in Bill's handwriting. If you're reading this, the company is in crisis and Richard has broken enough to be rebuilt. The money comes from a source that must remain secret, but it's legal, ethical, and intended for one purpose: to build Haven. The USB contains something more valuable than money, the complete blueprint for a new kind of capitalism, not just housing and healthcare, but a total reimagining of the relationship between companies and workers. I spent my last years developing it with economists, social scientists, urban planners. It's all there. The financial models, the legal structures, the implementation timeline. But it only works if Richard leads it. Emma looked up from the letter. What? The letter continued, Emma. You have the heart but not the experience. Richard has the experience but had lost the heart. Together, you're complete. Richard must be CEO again, but a different kind of CEO. Emma must be chairman, providing the moral compass. Dorothy must be chief legal officer, protecting the structure. Sarah must be CFO, keeping us honest. And Frank, if he's still alive, must be the conscience watching over it all. The check comes from Chen Wei. Everyone froze. Yes, the man trying to buy you, 20 years ago. I saved his father's business when China was seizing private companies. He owes me a debt he's been waiting to repay. The hostile takeover was theater, designed to force Richard's breakdown and Emma's emergence. Chen Wei never intended to buy Innovate Global. He intended to save it. Richard sat down hard. Bill orchestrated everything. My breakdown, Emma's arrival, even the crisis. Not orchestrated, Dorothy said quietly. Anticipated. He knew human nature. He knew Richard would betray him, that Emma would fight for workers, that crisis would either destroy or transform us. Sarah had plugged in the USB, was scrolling through documents. This is incredible. It's a complete economic model. Employee ownership escalating over time. Profit sharing tied to tenure. Healthcare that actually prevents instead of just treats. Education systems that train the next generation of workers. It would take $50 billion to fully implement. But the returns, she looked up. In 20 years, it would be the most valuable company structure on Earth. We don't have $50 billion, Emma pointed out. We have $500 million, Richard said, standing. And 12% additional ownership from Dorothy's shares. And Frank's $10 million. And Yamamoto's $10 million. And... He pulled out his phone. And whatever I can raise in the next 7 days. From who you've burned every bridge. No, I've burned every bridge with the old Richard Montgomery. But the new one, the one who gave up everything to build something better, that story might be worth something. Emma looked at the team around her. Dorothy, the mother who'd protected her from shadows. Richard, the broken prince learning to be whole. Sarah, the calculating mind finding heart. Frank, dying but determined. We're really going to do this. We're going to try, Richard said. Then softer, Bill believed we could. The next morning's press conference was different. Instead of the marble lobby, they held it in the half-built Haven community. 10 families in construction trailers as backdrop. Children playing in dirt that would someday be gardens. Richard stood at the podium, but Emma stood beside him. Equals. 5 weeks ago, I tried to kill myself. Richard began. No prepared remarks, just truth. I stood on a bridge, ready to jump, because I'd betrayed everything good in my life. Emma Sullivan saved me. A 19-year-old girl I'd mocked and humiliated saved my life. And then she gave me something more valuable than life. She gave me purpose. The reporters actually put down their phones, listening. Bill Sullivan built this company on a dream that business could be family. I corrupted that dream into quarterly earnings and stock options. But Bill knew I would. He planned for it. He left instructions, resources, And most importantly, he left Emma. Richard stepped aside. Let Emma take the podium. In 7 days, Innovate Global will either die or be reborn. Emma said, "We have enough money to survive. Barely. If we continue as we are. Or we have enough to begin something revolutionary. To build not just housing but community. Not just jobs but careers. Not just a company but a family of 20,000 souls." "What about profits?" someone called out. "Profits matter," Sarah answered, stepping forward. "But they're not the only thing that matters. Our projections show that investing in employees, really investing, not just dental plans and casual Fridays, creates loyalty that translates to innovation, productivity, and yes, profits, but long-term profits, patient profits, humane profits." "This sounds like socialism," another reporter said. "It's not," Dorothy interjected. "It's capitalism evolved. Employees earn ownership through tenure and performance. Free market principles still apply, but within a structure that recognizes workers as assets to grow, not costs to cut. And if it fails..." Emma and Richard exchanged glances. "Then we'll have failed trying to build something worthy," Richard said, "which is better than succeeding at something worthless." Chen Wei emerged from the crowd. Everyone tensed. He walked to the podium, every step measured. "My father," he said into the microphones, "was saved by Bill Sullivan in 1976. Not with money, though that came too, but with dignity. With belief that a Chinese businessman could succeed in America. I've spent 30 years in traditional business, buying and stripping companies. It's made me wealthy and empty." He turned to Emma. "Your grandfather's check was my money, sent through channels that took 20 years to construct. It was always intended for this moment, not to buy Innovate Global, but to fund its transformation." "Why?" Emma asked. "Because I have children, and they ask me what I build, not what I buy. I want to tell them I helped build Haven, that I helped prove business can have conscience, that their father did one thing that mattered." He pulled out another check. 100 million additional, not for shares, not for control. A gift. Build Bill's dream. The reporters exploded with questions, but Emma wasn't listening. She was watching the 10 families in their trailers. Maria Gonzalez holding her disabled son. Bobby Martinez helping an elderly neighbor. The security guard teaching children to play soccer in the dirt. "Mr. Wei," she said, loud enough to cut through the chaos. "Would you like to see the plans? The real plans?" They spent the rest of the day in the construction trailer that served as headquarters. Chen Wei, Richard, Emma, Dorothy, Sarah, and Frank, who'd checked himself out of the hospital against medical advice. They spread Bill's blueprints across plywood tables, traced infrastructure with fingers, debated, argued, dreamed. "Phase 1, immediate," Richard said. 10 houses completed in 6 days for our volunteer families. Phase 2, 50 houses in 60 days. Phase 3, the full community in 1 year. The school, Emma added, free for employees' children. Sliding scale for community. Staffed by teachers paid 30% above district average. Health care center, Frank wheezed. Preventive care, mental health, addiction treatment. The whole person, not just the symptoms. Daycare, Dorothy said. Free for employees working full-time, subsidized for part-time. Staffed by early childhood development specialists, not minimum wage workers. The economics work, Sarah confirmed, running numbers on her tablet. Reduced turnover saves 40 million annually. Increased productivity from employee wellness adds 60 million. The tax benefits from the structure are enormous. Will be profitable in 3 years, wildly profitable in 5. But will the employees trust us? Emma asked. After everything, they'll trust this, Richard said, pulling out a document he'd been working on. Employee ownership plan. Every employee gets shares vesting over 5 years. After 10 years, employees collectively own 30% of the company. After 20 years, 50%. You're giving away half the company? Bill's company was never meant to be owned. It was meant to be shared. Chen Wei stood. I need to return to Shanghai. But I'll be watching. The entire global business community will be watching. If this works. When it works, Emma corrected. When it works, it changes everything. Every company will have to adapt or lose their workforce to places that treat humans like humans. He left them with blueprints and dreams, with $600 million and 6 days to prove the impossible was possible. Frank collapsed 2 hours later. They rushed him back to the hospital, where he grabbed Emma's hand with surprising strength. Bill saw all of this. He gasped. Every move, every crisis, every revelation. He was playing chess while we played checkers. Rest. Frank. Please. One more thing. The portrait. Bill's portrait. Look behind it. Then the machine started screaming, and doctors pushed them out, and Frank Morrison, last of the founding dreamers, closed his eyes one final time. They found it that night, behind Bill Sullivan's portrait. Another letter, shorter, written in shaking hands days before his death. Emma, my pequeña, by now you know the truth. About Dorothy, about Richard, about the elaborate web I wove to protect you and the dream. Some will call it manipulation. I call it love. Love for you, for Richard, for Dorothy, for every soul who believes business can be better. Build haven. Not just the place, but the idea. Prove that companies can profit by putting people first. Show the world that the false choice between humanity and success is a lie told by those who profit from suffering. I'm proud of you. I was proud of you before you were born, knowing you would exist, knowing you would stand where you're standing, holding tomorrow in your 19-year-old hands. Love, Grandfather P. S. Tell Richard I knew about the Swiss accounts from day one, and I forgave him from day one. Sometimes we have to sin to learn the cost of virtue. Emma folded the letter, looked at her assembled team. They had 6 days, 600 million, and 6,000 skeptics watching. Tomorrow, she said, we pour the first foundation. Tonight, Richard corrected, pulling on a hard hat. We clear the ground. They worked through the night. CEO and janitor, chairman and secretary, all equal in dust and sweat and purpose. By dawn, 10 foundation holes had been dug. 10 holes in the ground that would hold 10 houses that would shelter 10 families that would prove a dream that would change American business forever. Or they would fail, and Bill Sullivan's dream would die with the sunrise. Either way, Emma thought as she watched the sun rise over the mountains, they would fail or succeed together, and that, perhaps, was the real revolution. 6 days later, Emma stood in the doorway of Maria Gonzalez's new house as the single mother carried her disabled son across the threshold. The boy, Carlos, laughed as his mother spun him in the living room, their living room, in their house, part of their community. 9 other families were doing the same, exploring homes built in less than a week by an army of volunteers working around the clock. The press was there. Of course. They'd been documenting everything. This impossible sprint to prove an impossible dream. The stock had stabilized, even risen slightly. The word haven was trending globally, but none of that mattered as much as the look on Maria's face when she set Carlos down and he walked, slowly, painfully, but walked shy to his new bedroom. His therapy room is next door, Emma told her. The specialists start Monday. Maria couldn't speak. She just nodded, tears streaming. Richard appeared beside Emma, dust in his hair, paint on his expensive shoes. He'd worked construction for 6 straight days, learning to swing a hammer from Bobby Martinez, taking orders from foremen who used to empty his trash. The board meeting's in an hour, he said quietly. The new board, 5 employees elected by their peers, 3 independent directors Chen Wei had recommended, And the executive team. Democracy replacing autocracy. You ready to be CEO again? Emma asked. No, Richard said honestly, but I'm ready to try. The boardroom felt different with natural light streaming through windows Dorothy had insisted on uncovering. The old heavy drapes were gone. The obsidian table replaced with renewable bamboo. Bill's portrait hung in its original place, but now surrounded by photos of employees, all 20,000 of them. A mosaic forming the company logo. First item, Emma said, taking her place as chairman. The employee ownership proposal. Richard stood, but he didn't use the projection screen. Instead, he pulled out handwritten notes, the kind Bill used to make. Every employee gets shares, he began. Not options that might be worth something someday, but actual shares, voting shares, starting immediately, vesting over 5 years, accelerated for tenure already served. Maria Gonzalez, 19 years with the company, gets her full allocation today. Bobby Martinez, 6 years, gets 40% today. The dilution, one of the independent directors started, makes us stronger. Sarah interrupted. Employee-owned companies outperform traditional structures by 30% on average. When workers own their work, they work differently. But the control remains with the mission. Emma said, my 40%, Dorothy's 12%, and the employee's eventual 50% all come with voting agreements that prevent any sale that results in layoffs. We can go public again. We can grow. We can even merge. But we cannot betray the people who build this company every day. The vote was unanimous. Even the skeptics couldn't argue with the math Sarah presented, the projections that showed Haven becoming a $30 billion company within a decade. Second item, Dorothy said, Project Haven expansion. The numbers were staggering. Phase 2, 50 houses in 60 days. Phase 3, a full community of 500 homes within a year. The school, the medical center, the daycare, the community center, $4 billion total investment over 5 years. The capital comes from us, Richard said. We're implementing an executive compensation cap. No one in the C-suite makes more than 20 times the median employee salary. The savings fund, Haven, you're capping your own salary. I'm eliminating my salary, Richard corrected. I have enough money. What I need is redemption, and that doesn't come with a price tag. Someone knocked on the door. Marcus Thompson entered, his security uniform replaced with a suit that didn't quite fit. Ms. Sullivan, Mr. Montgomery, there's someone here to see you. Behind him, a woman entered, 60-something, elegant in the way of old money, carrying herself like she owned the air she breathed. Emma didn't recognize her, but Richard went pale. Hello, Richard, the woman said. Mother? Richard's voice cracked like a teenager's. Eleanor Montgomery hadn't seen her son in 15 years. She'd disowned him when he'd refused to join the family business, a hedge fund that specialized in hostile takeovers. The irony wasn't lost on anyone. I saw the news, Eleanor said. My son, giving away his fortune to build houses for workers. The Journal called it insanity. It probably is, Richard said. Your father would have hated it. I know, Eleanor smiled, the first warm expression she'd shown. Good. Your father was a bastard who destroyed companies for sport. I've watched you become him for 20 years, and it broke my heart. But this, she gestured around the room, at the photos of employees, at the Haven plans spread on the table. This is the boy I raised, the one who gave his lunch money to homeless kids, the one who cried when we had to fire the gardener. She pulled out a check. $50 million. My divorce settlement from your father. I've been saving it for something worthy. Build your town, son. Show the Montgomery name can create, not just destroy. Richard stood frozen. Emma nudged him forward. He hugged his mother for the first time in 15 years, both of them crying in a boardroom that had seen too many tears lately. There's more, Eleanor said, pulling back. I've been talking to other executive wives, ex-wives, widows, women who watch their husbands destroy lives for quarterly earnings. We've formed an investment group, 300 million, ready to invest, but only in companies that meet Haven standards. Haven standards? Emma asked. Employee ownership, health care that includes mental health, child care support, and a CEO salary cap. We're calling it the Humanity Portfolio. Sarah was already running numbers on her tablet. 300 million could fund phase 2 entirely. We could have the school operational by fall, the medical center by winter. There's a condition, Eleanor said. I want a position, not on the board, not in management. I want to teach at the school. 3rd grade. It's what I did before I married money and lost myself. Done, Emma said immediately. Mrs. Montgomery, welcome to Haven. The meeting continued for 3 more hours. They approved budgets that prioritized people over profits, strategies that valued longevity over quick wins, and a mission statement that Bill Sullivan would have loved, building tomorrow's economy on today's humanity. As the board members filed out, Dorothy stopped Emma. There's something else. Frank's will was read this morning. Emma's heart sank. In the chaos of construction, she'd almost forgotten Frank was gone. He left everything to Haven, not the company, the community. $40 million. But it has to be used for a specific purpose. Dorothy handed her the will. Frank's shaky handwriting spelled it out. For the Frank Morrison Center for Second Chances, a facility for employees dealing with addiction, mental health, or life crises, because Bill believed in second chances, and so do I. That evening, Emma walked through the construction site. 50 more foundations had been poured. Workers, employees now, employee owners, labored past sunset, not because they had to, but because they wanted to. She found Bobby Martinez teaching a group of teenagers how to frame a wall. My dad would have loved this, Bobby said. He always said the company could be more than cubicles and spreadsheets. It will be, Emma promised. Her phone rang. An unknown international number. Ms. Sullivan. This is Lars Anderson from the Copenhagen Business School. We've been following your Haven experiment. We'd like to send a team to study it, document it, teach it. The Scandinavian model has proven social capitalism works. Your American version could be the bridge between our system and pure capitalism. Send them, Emma said. We have nothing to hide. She hung up to find Richard standing beside her, looking at the sunset over the construction. Your grandfather would be proud, he said. He'd tell us we're just getting started. We are. Chen Wei called. 6 other Chinese companies want to implement Haven-style communities. The dominoes are falling. Emma. They stood in comfortable silence, watching their impossible dream take physical form. Then Richard's phone buzzed. He looked at it, and his face went white again. What is it? He showed her the screen. A message from Chen Wei. Urgent. Harrison is launching hostile takeover with vulture fund backing. Has found legal flaw in supervoting shares. Moving tomorrow morning. Emma felt the ground shift beneath her feet. Harrison, the board member who'd resigned in anger, had spent 6 weeks plotting revenge. How much backing? According to Chen, $2 billion. Enough to buy every share except yours and Dorothy's, then challenge the supervoting provision in Delaware court. He has precedent. Apparently, similar structures have been invalidated when deemed unfair to minority shareholders. Can he win? Richard's silence was answer enough. Emma looked at the 10 finished houses, lights warming windows, families settling in for their first night of security, at the 50 foundations waiting for walls, at the workers laboring with hope instead of fear. Then we fight, she said. We've come too far to let Harrison turn this into another cautionary tale about dreaming too big. How we can't match $2 billion? No, Emma said, remembering something her grandfather wrote. But we can do something Harrison never expects. We can tell the truth, all of it, every secret, every revelation, every piece of the puzzle Bill put together. Let the world judge whether Haven deserves to exist. She pulled out her phone, opened Twitter, and began typing, tomorrow. Someone will try to destroy Haven to make a profit. Here's the complete story of how we got here and why it matters. The first tweet went viral in minutes. The second crashed her mentions. By the third, hashtag Save Haven was trending globally. Emma, Richard said, watching the social media explosion. You're gambling everything on public opinion. No, she corrected. I'm gambling on something more powerful. I'm gambling on people being tired of watching the rich get richer while communities die. I'm gambling on hope being stronger than greed. Her phone rang. Chen Wei. I've been monitoring Harrison's communications, he said without preamble. The attack comes at market open, 9:30 a.m. You have 11 hours. Then we'd better make them count. Emma looked at Richard, at Dorothy who'd just arrived, at Sarah running toward them with her tablet showing worldwide response to the tweets. All hands meeting, Emma announced. Every employee, every family, everyone who believes in Haven, midnight, we're going to show Harrison what happens when you attack a family. Richard smiled, the first genuine smile she'd seen from him since this all began. Your grandfather really did plan for everything, didn't he? No, Emma said, thinking of Bill's letters, his elaborate web of preparation and love. He didn't plan for Harrison, but he did something better. He made sure we'd be strong enough to face whatever came, together. As workers spread the word about the midnight meeting, as families emerged from their new homes, as 20,000 employees across the city prepared to fight for their future, Emma pulled out her grandfather's fountain pen and wrote on a piece of scrap lumber, Haven, where humanity is the highest return on investment. Tomorrow, Harrison would attack with billions. Tonight, they would prepare with something worth more belief that business could be better, that companies could be families, that the American dream didn't have to die in boardrooms and bankruptcy courts. The war for Haven's soul was about to begin. The midnight meeting wasn't in a conference room. Emma stood on a makeshift platform between the 10 completed houses, construction lights turning everything golden. 20,000 faces looked back at her, employees who'd driven through the night, families clutching children, retirees who'd worked for Bill Sullivan, teenagers whose parents built this company. Harrison wants to destroy this, Emma said, her voice carrying across the crowd without a microphone. Not because we're failing, but because we're succeeding. Because if Haven works, every company will have to explain why they can't do the same. Maria Gonzalez stepped forward from her new doorway. My son took his first steps without pain today. In this house, tell me what you need. Bobby Martinez joined her. My dad died at his desk for this company. I won't let Harrison sell his sacrifice. One by one, they came forward, the security guard, the accountant, the programmers, the janitors. Dorothy emerged from the shadows, her perfect composure replaced with raw determination. Richard stood beside employees he'd once ignored, equal in purpose. Sarah held up her tablet. If every employee refuses to sell their shares, Harrison needs 70% of public float. That's mathematically impossible if we stand together, Emma finished. The crowd erupted, not in applause, but in something deeper. A sound like hope refusing to die.